We know how to create charts and add some trend lines. What about having a dynamic range for our chart? We know we can create a chart quite easily. Here we have a dynamic ranges working file. If I wanted to create a chart of this simple data here, I could highlight the data. In fact, I don't even need to highlight the data. I could just click in, do our clever keyboard shortcut of F11 and create a chart. However, I then went back to the sheet where the data is, added in March numbers, had a look back at the chart. It doesn't change. I would need to physically go in and edit the range that the data is feeding the chart with. However, with the dynamic range, we could set the sheet up so that if you added more data, the chart would know about it and just respond itself. So let's delete this chart one, come back to method one, delete our March for the moment, and have a look at the two available methods. Now the first method is the easiest, most simplest, and probably the quickest to do, and that is simply to use tables. Now we've already covered tables earlier, so all I'm going to do here is create a table, which I do by clicking into the data, keyboard shortcut of Ctrl+T. That creates us a table along with all the table abilities we've already seen, so the banding of the rows, the filtering, etc. I'm not going to recover that ground. You can go back and have a look for that. What we're going to do now though is we've created the table, so let's create a graph the same way. Just click into the data and F11. That creates me the same chart that I saw previously. Fantastic. The difference now though is if I go back to the method one sheet, we know we can add more data to this table by simply going to the bottom right hand cell and tabbing. I will then add March in. Now we know that March has been added to the table because we just tabbed out of the bottom right hand corner. Has it been added to the chart? Well, there's March's information. And the same would happen if we continued, went to April. We have a set of cells that are contained within a table. Therefore, as the table expands, the chart sees that expansion and graphs accordingly. An extra 43 in there, that's because I typed it in. So that is the easiest method. You can't really get much easier than that. However, sometimes people aren't happy with tables, sometimes the table isn't quite appropriate for your data, and sometimes you're on an old version of Excel, so prior to 2007 when tables were introduced, and you don't have tables as an option. So let's have a look at method number 2. A little bit trickier, to say the least, but still achievable. In here, we need to create some named ranges that are dynamic. Now we need to create a named range for each of our series. So one named range for Bob, one for Jim, one for Sue, and to make life easier, one for the labels also. That's 4 named ranges. So how do we create a named range that will expand when there's more data in that column? Well, fairly straightforward, I suppose. We go to the Formula ribbon and the Name Manager. Now in the Name Manager, because we've just created a table, we already have the table, which is really how that chart is able to respond, because the named range expands with the table expansion. But we need to do this next bit ourselves. We need a new named range. That named range has assumed the name Bob, because that's where I am in the sheet. Now, when I'm naming the range, it has to be different from what effectively will be the column heading for the chart. Otherwise, Excel will get a little confused. I'm going to call it Bob Data. Scope for my named range is the workbook, and then it refers to, at the moment, just cell B1. Well, I don't want it to refer to cell B1. I want it to refer to cell B2 for as much as there is data down here. So effectively, I want it to expand for as many cells as there are data. To do that, I use the offset function. So equals offset, open brackets. Where's the start point for this range that I'm going to select? Well, that's B2. Obviously, I need to tell it which sheet. So that's method 2, exclamation mark, B2, comma. The second value of my offset function requires a rows value. So that's how far to offset the rows. Well, I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay in B2. And then comma, number of columns offset. Well, again, I want to stay in B2. So let's put a 0. Let's just alter the reference there to B2 to be fixed. So I'm going to place some dollars in there. And then comma. The last part of the offset function is the one that's really going to do the work, because this is the height of the range. How do I determine the height of the range? Well, we could count how many values there are in column B. Count A, method 2, exclamation mark, $B, colon, $B. That's going to count how many more values there are down here. However, that's counting the whole of column B, so it's going to count Bob as well. I don't want it to count Bob, so I put -1. I then close my round brackets with the offset function. Okay, that creates Bob data, which is this column starting from B2 for as long as there are values really. Then we need to do the same again for Jim. So new, Gym data. Effectively the same information here. Should have copied and pasted, shouldn't I? We will when we do Sue. So offset, method2, exclamation mark, this time C2, $C, $2 is the start point for my range. I don't want to be offset at all on the rows or the columns, so that's 0, 0, and then I need to know how many values there are in column C. Count A, method2 to get the name of the sheet, $C, $C gives me the count of the values in that column. Take away 1 so that it doesn't count the label at the top, so it doesn't count the word gym. Close the round brackets for the offset function. This time we're going to copy that whole function. OK creates gym data. We then need to create Sue's data, so new Sue data. I'm going to paste in the function I have on the clipboard so I can make minimal changes, which is effectively to change all the C's to D's, because we're now looking at column D. By clicking out, I've picked up some extra cell references there, that's okay. We're looking at offset method2 D2, which is the start of Sue's data. No row offset, no column offset, just widen that. Counting how many values there are in column D, take away 1 for Sue at the top. That's Sue data. That's my 3 data dynamic ranges. So you can see this is a little bit more complicated than just using a table. One more dynamic range is needed for the labels. New, let's call that labels. And here we want to offset, starting with the first label, which is in A2, $A, $2, comma, 0, 0, so no row and no column offset, and then count effectively how many labels there are in column A. So method2, exclamation mark, $A, $A. Now this time I don't need to take away 1, although I could do to finish the formula off, because there's actually no value in A1. But if I'd placed, for example, the word month in there, then I would need to do the take away 1. I've got to watch whether I have a value in there or not. Because I haven't, I don't need to do the take away 1. Close round brackets, OK. And that's my labels set up. So 1 series for the labels, and then 1, 2, 3 dynamic named ranges. Now these are the ones that are going to do the work for us. We then close, done the hard work now. We create our chart as normal. There's our little chart. But then we need to swap the data that Excel has chosen for our named ranges. We're going to select data. I'm going to switch the row and columns around so the data sets are in the same place, and then Bob edit. His label is coming from there, that's fine, the label's good. It's the data that's coming from the wrong place. So we delete the range, we leave method2 exclamation mark, and then put the named range, which is Bob data. Okay, same for Jim. Leave the label selection, that's okay. All the way back to method2 exclamation mark, Jim data. Okay, Sue edit, leave the label, method2 exclamation mark, Sue data. So that's replaced Bob, Jim and Sue with their dynamic ranges. We now need to do the same for the months. Now I only need to replace Jan, and dynamic range will sort the rest out. I go to edit. This is coming from method2, and then it's labels is the name of my named range. OK, and then say OK. Nothing's changed because no data has changed. If I go back into method2 and simply add more data, such as March, and have a look back at this chart 3, will it have dynamically responded? Yes, it has. There's the March data. So now that I have the offset methods, I don't need the table. I'm using the clever offset named ranges. I can just add more data down here, and it will automatically be picked up by the effectively expanding ranges. And then the chart sees the new range and it picks the data up. So I've added 2 more months, look at chart 3, and April and May now exist. So that's the ability to use a dynamic range within your charts. Either method 1, the easy way using tables, or method 2, let's use our dynamic named range using the clever offset function.